Hi everyone, thank you for joining me again. Gotta be honest, I'm feeling a little bit flat and tired today, but I thought if I read an experience I might actually pick myself up a little bit, and the added benefit is that I get another episode out of the way and you guys can enjoy it too. So my apologies in advance if I do sound a little bit flat and disengaged, but yeah, I'll do my best, and hopefully this experience is an interesting one for all of us. This one is from someone called Odell. Forgive me for that pronunciation. I'm not too sure of the nationality that name comes from, but yeah, that's how it sounds as in terms of how it looks through spelling. So this is Odell's experience. My dad was on vacation with us during the summer of 1952. After doing things around the house for a few days, he decided to go fishing at the Brazos River, which were only a few miles from us. I asked to go along so I could go swimming. With Mum and Dad's approval in hand, I then asked if my 4 neighbour friends could go with me. Again, with their approval, we all put our swim trunks on and piled into the car. Upon arriving at the river, we all ran into the water and started having the time of our lives. Dad took his fishing gear and went about 30 or 40 yards away and started fishing. About half an hour later, we decided to move to another location, since the fish weren't biting at all where we had been fishing. We came over to where we were and announced, "I'm going upstream to Red Bluff. You guys go and come with me." We said, "Okay, we'll wait up there." As we waded upstream, the other guys got about 15 yards ahead of me. I was following in their path in the water, whose depth was up to my chest. At this time, I did not know how to swim. As I was wading along, I suddenly went under the water, way over my head. I had stepped into a hole in the river that was too deep for me. It happened so fast and suddenly that I did not get a breath of air before going under the water. I began struggling to reach the surface and was swallowing water at the same time. When I finally broke the surface, I began spitting out water, but before I could get a breath of air, I sank underneath again. I continued struggling to get above the surface. I was swallowing more water because I had no air in my lungs. I continued this cycle of struggling to get to the surface, spitting out water and going back under without getting a breath of air. Finally, my muscles became too tired to struggle anymore, and I gave up trying. Immediately, my movements seemed to go into extreme slow motion, and I could see my hands and arms moving agonizingly slow. At this point, I did not feel any more pain or tiredness from the struggle. I seemed to be an impartial observer watching the event play out. I then started rising up until I was about 10 or 12 feet under the water and watched my body in the water struggling continue to struggle in slow motion. I had no mental attachment to the body, nor was I concerned that I was drowning. I was completely aloof about it. As I turned my attention away from my body in the water, a bright, penetrating light appeared before me. It was the brightest light I had ever seen, yet it did not hurt my eyes. I looked down at my new body and saw that I was clothed in white garments, just like people wore in the days of the Roman Empire, except that the garment hung low enough that my feet were not visible, unless I extended my foot and leg forward enough to reach beyond the hem of the garment. The light seemed to penetrate my garments and me, such that my body and clothes became the purest white ever. The light was about the size of a basketball, and the outer surface seemed to be crystal clear. All the more reason why the light within was so bright. The light seemed to be churning, just like smoke churns as it rises, yet the churning was contained within the confines of the sphere as the rays of light radiated outwards. As I was studying the sphere of light, I suddenly saw a very black speck in the center of it. For some reason, I knew this tiny speck was very important, and so I concentrated on it very intensely. As I concentrated on it, it suddenly zoomed out towards me, and there, standing before me, was Jesus in all his glory, bigger than life itself. He wore the same clothes as I did, and he radiated a powerful golden light in every direction from his body. Light travels at 360,000 feet per second, yet with my spiritual eyes I could easily see the rays of golden light emanating outward from him towards infinity. The colour of this golden light coming from him was so beautiful that the English language is incapable of describing its purity. I immediately held up my hands and arms in front of my face to shield myself from his brightness, and told him to get away from me. I almost fell over myself trying to get away from him. He was so pure and clean that I was not worthy of being in his presence, nor anywhere close to him. I was too adulterated and contaminated with the impurities of this world. I was contaminated with the impure deeds of the things I had done. Lying, stealing, fighting, all the negative things that a little 11-year-old boy does. I was contaminated with all the mental impurities I had done. Hatred, distrust, sarcasm, resentment, fear, narcissism and anger. Even though I wanted to stay there in his presence, I couldn't, because God's law forbids everything evil from heaven. Jesus stretched his hand towards me, and immediately all my guilt fell away, and I received the most overpowering feeling of love from him. Although his lips did not move, he said, "Fear not, peace." He seemed to communicate to me through extrasensory perception rather than a physical spoken word by mouth. He seemed to sense my question of why we could talk to each other without physically speaking. He told me that we communicate this way to eliminate errors in speech, an understanding that is common with all spoken languages. In effect, while I was thinking something, I was magically transposed to him immediately, and he knew what I thought. I only had to think of something to say, and it immediately became word. At this point, as we are conversing through ESP, a giant screen appeared next to us. It was so gigantic that I can naturally compare it to the large screens that used to be in the old drive-in theatres of the 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s. On this screen, in random order, different scenes of incidents that had happened in my life while here on earth were being played out. Jesus would select one scene and it would expand to the point that it encompassed almost the entire screen. I could see other scenes other scenes playing in the background around the edges of the main scene that we were reviewing. The scene we were reviewing was the most accurate depiction of an incident that I was involved in at that point in my life. And he questioned me as to why I did the things that I had done. At first, most of the scenes that were discussed were ones in which I had done something wrong or bad. However, he also pointed out scenes where I had done something outstanding. In the bad scenes, he chastised me severely and used it as a teaching moment to ingrain into me that I must always be truthful, loving, or good in all of my actions and words. While reviewing a scene in which I had done something bad or wrong, I could see that I had acted inappropriately and wanted to slant my behaviour to make the action seem less evil to him. As soon as I started giving a slanted reason for my actions, he would authoritatively stop me and correct me. When he corrected me, I had to acknowledge his truth and correct my slanted reason. Did you know Jesus has a great sense of humour? In some of the scenes where something funny happened or was said, he laughed with me and with gusto. After reviewing many scenes of my past, I was very worried and scared that I was not going to be able to go any further into heaven with him. Almost all of my past actions had been negative rather than positive or helpful. I had truly been a spoilt child, only concerned about the things that were important to a young child, such as toys, candy, food, etc. I was only concerned about me and no one else. Now I was desperately worried that I was going to be condemned forever. Next, the large screen went away. Jesus took my hand and we began moving through a long tunnel at very high speed. What is strange about this is that we were not in a vehicle moving at a high rate of speed. We were actually just standing still and holding each other's hand. But our bodies seemed to be levitating forward. We were just standing there motionless, yet we were zooming through the tunnel at an extreme rate of speed. While zooming through the tunnel, the sides of it did not zoom by like here on Earth. As you drive at a high speed down a road, all of the trees, signs and other objects that you are close to on the road will zoom by you and fade away into the rear as you continue down the road. In this tunnel, the walls, ceiling and floor did not zoom by and fade away to the rear. Instead, they seemed to stay right there as if they were still or motionless. I know that it's hard to fathom, but that's how I have to explain it. After what seemed an extremely long time moving through this tunnel, I began to wonder how much longer we were going to stay there and continue moving. I looked ahead and saw a small light that seemed to be moving closer to us. I thought to myself, at last, we're finally getting somewhere. Suddenly, back in the water in the river, something hit my right foot. Instantly, I was back in my body, fighting for a breath of air and struggling against the water. Next, I felt someone come up between my legs and raise me to the surface of the water so I could begin breathing again. As I began regaining my ability to breathe again, I noticed that the person I was sitting on was swimming underwater towards shore and beginning to struggle also. I thought to myself that he needed to come up for air. And I knew that I might cause him to drown if I didn't get off and let him come up. I swung one leg over and slid off his back, and he came up gasping for air. We waded to shore, and I started vomiting up all the water that I had swallowed. After vomiting several times, there was no longer any water in my stomach to vomit up. I continued dry heaving in an effort to expunge more water. Now my stomach started cramping from the overexertion of heaving. Slowly my heaving subsided and I began to recover. For the rest of the day, I was wary about venturing very far into the river again. I was in a state of shock for a day or two after this and did not remember anything that I saw while in the water. I was in pain from all the exertion of fighting the water and heaving up the water I had swallowed. Every muscle in my body was sore for almost a week. That's the end of Odell's experience. So I didn't realize this when I started going through the first bit, but looks like Odell was just a young kid. I think it says he was 11 years old at some point, and his near-death experience occurs due to a drowning accident. So going back to the start, this experience happened a fair time ago, back in 1952, which makes it about 72 years ago now. So Odell is going fishing with and swimming with his neighbours, and I think the parents are coming along and fishing as well. So they head down to their local river, and the fish aren't biting, so they decide to move upstream a bit. And as our near-death experience of this week is wading upstream, he stumbles across a large sort of pothole in the water or on the ground, and when he falls into this, he goes completely under, and because it looks like he can't swim very well, this is a problem. But it's just happened so quickly and so unexpectedly that no one really notices, and he finds himself struggling and fighting for his life pretty quickly. He goes under fairly rapidly and begins the usual process of what we hear about quite regularly when someone has one of these near-death experiences through drowning. They start to breathe in the water. Their body starts to struggle. They start panicking, and the panicking forces them to breathe even more water in, and this eventually obviously leads to death. So Odell, he's only 11 years old, and it must be very confused at this point as to what's actually going on, because he is in this state of panic and struggle and underwater, and then the next moment he is not. He is out of his physical body, and he is 10 to 12 feet above the water, watching this body continue to struggle. Sounds like he instantly recognizes this scene he's seeing. He seems to understand that it's his body in the water and his body that is drowning. But as we so often hear, there's a strong sense of disconnection with what he's seeing in terms of his body. There's no, there's no love for it or desire to help it. It's just like he is in this other form and he's watching this scene without any attachment whatsoever. It's just occurring. It seems like a natural thing. There's no panic from the awareness that is observing the vehicle, which is your human body in this reality, actually expiring and dying. There's the way this experiencer puts it, he says he's basically completely aloof about it. So just watching it, just watching someone die, it's like, meh, doesn't really matter. And obviously for us, hearing this as humans and our awareness fully emerged within the bodies that we are in, this is a little bit hard to comprehend, or a little bit almost distressing to think that someone could witness something like a human dying and feel no emotions whatsoever. This is a good example, I guess, of how different the perception or the reality or the awareness is between having it in a human body and then not having those constrictions and being in this other dimension and able to see the world totally differently. So at this part of the experience, he is still in our world, like he's still watching what's going on. There's no real other clues to him being in this other dimension except the obvious, of course. In fact, that he's not in his body. He's hovering above the ground a little bit. He's watching his human body die, but he is, at this point in the experience, not really experiencing anything more than that in terms of, some of these other things we hear when people die, that there's total disconnection from this physical realm. However, as the experience continues, he begins to notice that there's a light in front of him, and it's the brightest light he has ever seen. And then he's able to, after he sees this light, he sees that he's able to look down at his form, and he sees he has a new body, and it's clothed in these white garments, just like people wore in the Roman Empire. And this light, he notices, it seems to merge or become part of or complement his garments and makes his body almost glow a little bit. He says the light's sort of a part of him, but also separate from him. He can see it within himself, but also it's external to him, and it's about the shape, the size of a basketball, and it's crystal clear, and it's bright, and it's like churning out this radiance. And it's like a ball or a sphere, and it's just there in front of him, but it's also a part of him. And as he looks more closely at this light, he sees this tiny little black speck right in the middle of it. And as he's looking at this speck, he's noticing something profound about it. And he sort of has some kind of intuition that says, I should be paying attention to this little speck in this sphere of light. And as he puts more focus into it, as he puts more concentration into it, the little black speck suddenly zooms out towards him. And this little black speck emerges into a figure. And this figure is Jesus in all his glory, bigger than life itself. Now, he goes into a bit of description here as to what Jesus is wearing, and in this case, it's similar sort of clothes to the one Odell has on, so those Roman sort of garbs. And he is radiating more light and in every direction from his body. This light also has a bit of a description in terms of the colour, and he says it's golden, but at the same time he says it has this indescribable sort of purity to it. Like he can't, obviously, he says that the English language is really incapable of describing what this pure light actually looked like. And I think it goes beyond just describing the colour of this light, but often when we hear these experiences, there's, it's not just seeing something. It often there's a meaning or an experience attached to what they are seeing, and maybe this is similar in this situation. And then Odell, he says, once he sort of realizes who this is and becomes deeply absorbed in what he is witnessing, he kind of starts to feel a little bit of guilt, almost like he's not worthy of being in his presence. And this is interesting for me because this guy, he's only 11 years old and he's already feeling so, I don't know, dirty and dark and unworthy of being loved. He says he already has all these mental impurities such as hatred, distrust, sarcasm, resentment, fear, narcissism, and even anger. Now, I can't remember what I was like at 11, but, I can sort of, but, that's a long time ago now, almost 40 years. So I don't, sure, I remember parts of that. Like I remember feeling fear at that age, and I guess anger. I guess all those things are sort of already part of your experience as an 11-year-old. It's amazing how quickly we, as people, get to experience all these darker aspects of humanity. And now I start reflecting on it. I definitely felt quite a few there at that young age, and to think that we are all going through similar emotions, and we have to do that for 80, 90, 100 years. It's a little bit distressing to reflect on that, but I guess the older you get, the more used to it you get, and the wiser you become, and it becomes, I guess, more of just becomes part of the experience, and you learn your own little unique ways of adjusting to the negativity. But in this situation, Odell, he's only an 11-year-old kid, and he's suddenly seeing Jesus. Doesn't say if he had any religious affiliations before this experience, or what religion he was, but he's 11, he's a kid, he's going to find whatever's happening to him at this point very strange, I would have thought, regardless of what kind of spiritual education he's had. So here he is, 11-year-old kid, feeling unworthy of being in the presence of Jesus. And I guess in this case it's Jesus, but for those of you who are near-death experience addicts like myself, you would know that often these highly evolved beings can come in many forms. It might be an ancestor, it might be a spiritual guide, it might be God or the light itself. But yeah, in this case, it's Jesus. And he is feeling very, uncomfortable there. It's like this light is contrasting to the darkness that he has been experiencing, and he has absorbed almost as a personal characteristic. And somehow this light is running counter to how he feels about himself, which makes him ashamed to be in its presence. He just feels not worthy, But then Jesus stretches out his hand, and as Jesus reaches his hand, all those negative feelings, emotions, experiences seem to melt away and become insignificant. And it's like he's reconnecting to a part of himself that is immune from feeling the negativity and challenges that this world brings into all of our experience. Jesus' touch brings Odell the most incredible and overwhelming feeling of love, and they begin to communicate. Communication, as we all know, in this realm is not like we conduct ourselves here. It's through thoughts, or as Odell puts it, through extrasensory perception. And Odell suddenly thinks, okay, so without actually saying it, he just starts to think, okay, why are we communicating like this? Like, why aren't we actually using words? Why do we talk to each other through thoughts? And Jesus obviously hears this thought and responds back to him through ESP or thought. And the answer that Jesus gives is that communication is done in this realm in this particular way because speech can often be misinterpreted and misunderstood, and confusion can result, and which leads to miscommunication. And therefore, in this realm, the better way of actually understanding each other is through thought-like communication. And that makes perfect sense to me. If we as humans could all walk around and not have to use our mouths to communicate, and just thought communicated, how would this place be incredibly messed up, or what? Like, I know my thoughts are negative a lot of the time, and if we were all able to read each other's thoughts, it's kind of good in a way that I think we get that opportunity to block that out. But yeah, obviously in this other realm, that there's nothing, you can't hide anything, and thoughts are just clearly transferred back and forth between different beings. But then again, you have to remember, in this other dimension, it's not in this physical realm anymore, so maybe our thoughts are a little bit clearer, loving, connecting. And it's even more interesting to reflect on the fact that you still even have thoughts in this other realm. Like, you are this being that can still see and experience and think, and I read these experiences and I think, oh my God, this is too good to be true. A lot of the time I think like it just seems such a far cry from the world we live in, and there's so many different aspects to this other realm that are magical, and sometimes you lose faith and you think surely this can't be real. But I was thinking today as I was going for my swim, like there's the old scientist versus spiritual seeking of understanding how this world, universe, people came into existence. And you look at where we are today, 2024, and how far we've come scientifically, and we've learnt a lot. We've learnt, sort of how big the universe is, and supposedly how it started through some sort of bang or explosion. We've learnt we're not the center of the universe, and there's many, many galaxies, and we're just a tiny little dot in this huge creation. But at the end of the day, there's still no real explanation as to why this Big Bang started, or why there's all these rules in the universe that seem to be adhered to, and the laws of physics and all that sort of thing. But that science has come a long way, and then so scientists as of yet are really yet to explain how creation, like how something came of nothing. Whereas on the other hand, spiritual people, beliefs, traditions teach us that there is a creator, and a lot of spiritual people have this dead set certainty, faith that this place has all been created by something or someone or some sort of energy or something that, something like a God. And I was just thinking, this morning, like, that's kind of interesting. Like, these people seemingly know that something has created this place, and scientists are yet to sort of give us an answer. And is it even possible for science to measure, determine, explain, understand something as infinite and inexplicable and formless and intelligent as something that's created all this? I don't know. I guess 10,000 years' time they might, but at the moment, I think the best explanation we have of this whole creation is some sort of higher power. So anyway, Odell's talking to Jesus, and they're conversing through thoughts, and then Odell, he then has a life review. Now you got to remember, this kid is only 11 years old, and there's not that much of a review to have, you would have thought. But I guess a lot can happen in 11 years. And in this life review, it's a little, it's not horrible, but it's a little bit distressing to think that this is happening to someone so young, and he is getting to see these scenes play out in his life, and the usual life review is happening, and certain scenes are getting zoomed in on, and others are sort of being skipped past. And it's just, as per usual, very accurate overview of Odell's life as up to the 11 years he's lived. And Jesus is kind of, this is the bit I find distressing, is like he's pointing out, or and he uses the word chastise him for certain parts of his life which aren't done as well as could have been. And it's just distressing to think that 11-year-old kid is being told that certain ways of acting haven't been correct and he should be doing it this way. And it's better to be conducting yourself in truthful and loving ways. And I don't know, when I read that, I just felt a little bit uncomfortable. But if we have learned anything from these experiences, everything sort of happens for a reason. And I guess if you're going to be pushed in a direction towards love, why not do it at a as younger age as you can? And maybe this kid was really in a bad way. He says that he was spoilt rotten and had acted pretty inappropriately on a regular basis. But it just comes across that way a little bit as I was reading it, that doesn't seem quite right to be treating someone that young in a way of, that hasn't really had enough life experience to understand what's right or wrong. But anyway, that's just the way I thought when I read it. So Jesus is there teaching him and sort of guiding him into a direction of better actions. And then he says, did you know Jesus had a great sense of humour? And he goes on to say that in certain scenes when something funny happened, Jesus was laughing with him and with great gusto. So after reviewing these scenes in his life and obviously running through a fair few scenes that were difficult or unpleasant to watch, he is getting a little bit stressed out now that his eternal path is not going to be one aligned with the heaven-like realm that he would like to be in. He feels that this life review has shown him how spoilt he has been, and how he valued only material objects like toys and candy and food, and very self-centered. And he is concerned that he was going to be condemned forever. I think that's a lot, what he's explained there is very similar to pretty much all children, isn't it? Like, no one really has any concept of, treating others as you would like to be treated, and how serving others and is more of a path to a better life than obtaining things like toys. But it's the kid's 11, so give me a break. Like, seriously, it's a pretty harsh lesson to learn at that age, is my opinion. But yeah, like I said, if it's pushed him into a direction that is going to make his life easier, then yeah, maybe it's served its purpose. But yeah, we don't know what happened with this kid's life because he doesn't really go into it. But obviously lived a fairly long life, because this experience happened in 1952, and yeah, I don't know when this was published, but yeah, he's gone on to journey a full life as a human. And like always, I kind of get a little bit curious as to what actually happens to these people when they don't actually let us know. So here he is, having this fairly negative life review with Jesus and getting a bit of training, getting a bit of guidance, getting a bit of direction. And from there, they move into a tunnel, which is interesting because usually you see that tunnel sort of situation at the very beginning of the experience. But I kind of was interested in this part of his experience because I spoke about the experience of the tunnel a week or two ago, and this one gives us a little bit more detail. So yeah, I was thinking, like, when I was talking about this tunnel experience the other episode or two ago, I was interested how there can actually be a tunnel when there's no such thing as space or time. So how can you even have movement at all if you can't go from A to B? Like this other dimension is head scratching, to say the least. So yeah, they're standing there, and this is how he describes the tunnel. It's not like they're zooming along like you're in a car on Earth and you can see the trees, the buildings, the people fly by and blur into the distance as you go past them. Here it's more like, he says, that it's standing still, and there's a sense of movement without actually seeing anything zoom by. It's, he's having a go at trying to explain what this is like, and I think we get the idea. It's not easy, because this other realm is very, very different to our own, and words are not going to do justice to what it was actually like. But anyway, he's had a go there, and he says he's in this tunnel, in this space, for what seems like a very long time. And he says eventually he starts to see this light at the end of the tunnel, and Odell just kind of thinks, okay, we're finally getting somewhere. And the next thing he knows, however, this light is gone. He is back in his body, back in the water, back feeling like his body is fighting for air and struggling. And yeah, he says that he kind of feels someone brush against him, and this person gives him a bit of a hand and helps him onto the shore. And that's the end of Odell's experience. And he ends it there. So thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed that one. I quite liked it myself. Thank you for putting up with my fatigue. I just hope everything is going good for you. Remind yourself that you are amazing and you are incredible for being the person you are, and remind yourself that this experience is challenging, so just to get through another day is a good achievement. And if you won't remind yourself, I will. You are absolutely bloody awesome. So just keep being yourself. And I look forward to talking to you next week, and sending you love. Goodbye.